This is Africa, also known as TIA. There's always some crazy thing happening here or some new experience that seems so off. These past days have been no different. Unusual as usual. There's no video or pictures for this episode. These events might be hard for some to hear and not possible for most to see. If you're squeamish, just know that I'm telling it like it is for good reason. I want to share how it truly is here. It's a very harsh place if you have the courage to look in the corners. But I have to go back a bit in time. Several months ago, I found a homeless man on the street. He was in his early 30s, a drug addict, and was dying of infection. The flesh on both his legs were open and decaying from the knees down. Other homeless men had poured boiling oil on him while he slept. Who knows why? There are gangs among the homeless population here. It wasn't the first time I had heard of their brutality. After vying for a blood transfusion, morphine, IV antibiotics, and labs for common diseases, all my efforts over a couple of weeks only reduced some of his suffering, I suppose. He died. The years of addiction was stronger than his will to live, and he wouldn't stay in the hospital for surgery and medication. I would go out and I would look for him, and he would come back for a short time, but then he would leave again, not finishing his treatment. So between the constant health challenges I've had here and nearly becoming a staff member at the hospital with the homeless man named Peter, I've made friends among the doctors in several facilities, and I was visiting one the other day. We chatted as we saw patients, and as usual, there was more than one in critical condition. As we stood in one of the triage rooms between two beds, I asked details about the patient's injuries. Then one of the men just slipped away, and the oxygen monitor began to beep. We started CPR while at the man's feet, a young man in his 20s began to cry, his legs growing weak, and I could see his heart breaking. Watching him, I had to fight back the tears. Though it is the main government hospital for an entire district, for us that would be like the same as a region of a state in the U.S., they are extremely ill-equipped. We were looking for sterile gloves, but they had run out and we couldn't find any. I was asking for a respirator and was told they didn't have one. A few minutes later, an old one was found, but it took 2 people to use it. 3 days the man had lain in a coma. No money, no surgery. He was a boda driver, stabbed through the skull into the frontal lobe. Why? To steal his motorcycle. It is the 7th I had heard about since November in this town. 3 just recently in one night. One of those bodies was left on the outside of the compound that I just moved from the beginning of January. I'm sure there have been more that I don't know. CPR was only performed for a very short time. Even if they were able to start his heart and breathing again, what then? Without immediate surgery, his brain had swollen with no relief. The doctors called it. For at least 15 minutes, I continued to check his pulse, praying, hoping, believing. It's surprising how fast the human body begins to turn cold once the heart stops. I had to tell the nurse how to turn off the beeping monitor. There was a scurry of activity afterward. Attendants rushed to get a change of clothes from the family, remove the bloody bandages, and wrap him in a sheet for the family to take the body away. The other man, with a head injury in the same room, no shirt, blood splattered all over his face, body, and soaked pants, began to shake uncontrollably. He was on an IV drip of fluids, but other than that, and a wrap for his wound, nothing else had been done. No relief for pain, no stitches, no surgery, no cleanup. He was waiting for a friend or relative that would be able to bring money for him to receive further treatment and purchase the medical supplies needed. He was going into shock. A few minutes later, I found out why that man had so much blood all over him. The one that he had had the near-fatal fight with lay outside on a concrete slab bench where the overflow of all patients had to stay, since beds are few. I went to check on him. Machetes are readily available and the choice weapon here. They are called pangas. And so these two went at each other. The man on the concrete slab had his arm nearly severed at the shoulder. No one had taken notice that the compression bandage had slipped and was now holding the wound open wide instead of covering it. I insisted to one of the nurses, as if I had the authority, that it be rebandaged immediately, as he too was going into shock. They've seen me moving often with the doctors and consulting with them, so they listen. It's a bit surreal that my studying medicine on my own for a lifetime, and because of my own experiences, that it has resulted in being able to share viable information with medical officers here who might not have access to up-to-date information. 2 days later, I sent a text to the doctor asking about the men's condition. I was told one was improving, having received some treatment. The other, after laying on the slab for 3 days, having raised no money for orthopedic surgery, had lost hope and left the hospital. I've spoken to an orthopedist about this patient, he also is a friend, and has agreed to consult if we can locate him. Up to now, we haven't been able to find him. My heart breaks for each one of these desperate people I see, and they never leave my mind. I've heard of several persons, including one child, who has died for lack of the hospital being able to provide oxygen, something we would never conceive a hospital not having. The facility in town that normally provides the tanks has had some major mechanical failure, and here you can't just phone around checking for the part and send someone across town to pick it up. Since then, tanks are being trucked from the nearest supplier 2 hours away. Sometimes they don't come quickly enough. I met a certain man long after his injuries, and he too had left the hospital without hope. His name is Pius, and a walking miracle. He's an employee of the woman that I stayed with temporarily for 3 months. I hope soon I will be able to sit and interview him so you can hear his amazing testimony of how God miraculously healed this man, and not in any way anyone could imagine. I think the most profound reason miracles are experienced here and similar places more often than at home is because so many are destitute on a level most people can't understand. All they have is faith the Lord will heal them. But sadly, many think that when they don't receive their healing from God right away, they think their best option to cover all bases is to turn to the witch doctors and revert to village concepts. Help can be given in every way you could probably think of and needed by every department of the hospital. If you would like to contribute equipment, supplies, or monetarily to an indigent critical patient fund, please contact me for more information. If you would like to find out more about Way to Grace and our primary mission here in Uganda, please visit waytograce.org or Way to Grace on Facebook. Until next time, TIA. Hallelujah.